So again, Michael Baurmann, it's great to have you, and the floor is yours. If you could speak for about, I don't know, 45 minutes or so, we'll then have a 5-minute break. And then there will be a short response by Nora Kinderman and Naomi Kloosterboer, both from the project, and then the floor will be open for a Q&A.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. Well, I must say I'm very sorry that I didn't come to Amsterdam, and I'm not a scared person in general, but in the moment, especially in our two countries, I think the development gets a little bit out of control, at least here in Germany in the moment. And so I prefer this time to stay in my office and close the door. But I very much hope that I can come to Amsterdam then some other time. And I want to say just, well, the Center for Advanced Internet Study offers fellowships. And so look at our website. And if you like to come to Bochum, which is also a very nice town, we have not so much water than Amsterdam, but we have many more streets, I'm afraid. So, but look at our website, make an application, come to Bochum, and we can offer you up to 6 months of fellowship if you like. Okay, I'm now going to change to look at my presentation. I think this is I hope you can see it.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, very, very good. Okay, then I will start on social epistemology of deviant beliefs, epistemic trust, and bounded rationality, as I called it. And I will first try to show you how this is embedded in my understanding of rational actor theory and social epistemology, and I will talk a little bit of epistemic trust and what you can call a street level epistemology combined with bounded rationality. Then I will explain you some results of our simulation model on social epistemic dynamics, and at the end I will present some hypotheses which follow from this model and which have to prove empirically. Okay, so the traditional rational choice theory, as you may know, is a very simple construct. Basically, it starts with given preferences. Normally, you assume they are selfish. Then you have some external restrictions of your situation, and you have some given beliefs. And then rational choice theory is thinking that you can deduct from there a rational choice, maybe normatively, maybe in the context of an experimentary theory. So, and rationality means maximization of utility under this external conditions. Well, this changed a lot in the last years and decades, and I now prefer to speak about rational actor theory. We'll see soon why. Well, the first big change was that the givenness of selfish preferences was given up, and people admit that there is a heterogeneity of preferences, social preferences, altruistic preferences, and so on, and that you have to take them into account if you want to explain behavior. One of the pioneers and still one of the most important experimental researcher, and this is Ernst Fehr and his group in Zurich. They have, first of all, they're talking about altruistic preferences, altruistic punishments, and so on. And this is a very nice, well, it's quite old already, but it's a very nice summary of their previous research. Well, the second big development, which you all know, it started already in the 50s, is that the maximization hypothesis was given up, and people, Simon was talking about bounded rationality. People are not only according to not only behaving according to the assumptions of rationality, pure rationality. You have bounded rationality. You have all kinds of restrictions on rationality. Well, and there is, of course, after the pioneers, there is, of course, Kahneman and Tversky in their research, which are very mostly responsible for getting insights from the experimental tradition in the actual behavior of people, which is not according to the rational choice model. And this is a nice summary of their research in the last decades, you may know. And you can also learn something about the self-confident, about Anglo-Saxon researchers in this book, which is therefore also interesting from such a perspective. Well, I'm most interested in another topic, and this is well, to open also this black box on given beliefs and so think about how can rational actor theory also can say something about the formation of beliefs. Can we use the rational actor theory, this experimentary power of this theory, to explain belief formation, or to put it others to other ways? We have to take beliefs more seriously, not just treating them as given data, but try to explain them themselves. And I don't, well, it's not necessary to argue why this is important, especially under the issues we are dealing with, you are dealing with in your project. And there is a pioneer, it's Russell Harding. He, in his How Do You Know, in 2009, I think it's of the first approach, the first concept of a theory, how we can integrate this in the rational actor theory. This was a good friend of mine. Unfortunately, he died 4 years ago. Well, if you look at his tie, you may see that his tie is quite similar than the cover of his book. And this is a result because his wife was an artist, and she was always looking on things like this. So, for me, this book was very important. Okay, the starting point of all this, of social epistemology and of economic theory of knowledge, was a so-called philosophical or individual epistemology, which here in a very simplified version. Well, what was the main assumptions? Well, that people have some experiences, that they start to reflect about these experiences, try to make a systematic examination of their assumptions they get from their reflections, and then at the end they get to something like justified true beliefs. And maybe you can apply the same to practical insights. Also, you have some experiences, people reflect about it and examine on the background of the tradition, maybe of ethics and practical philosophy, and that in the end they have the categorical imperative, also then very well justified. Okay, there you have it in a very, as I said, simplified form. Then beliefs, knowledge, rationally produced by experience, reflection, examination in a systematic process. Okay, we have now social epistemology, which mainly started, I don't know, 30 years ago, saying, well, this is a model which is deduced from scientific knowledge acquisition, has nothing to do like knowledge is produced in the social world, and it does not capture the processes in which in the social world people acquire their knowledge and their beliefs. And so we have to radically think again and look at the social processes which are behind knowledge acquisition. So, and then you see that instead of the individual experiences of facts, the most important thing is testimony, that we get all our knowledge of the world, mostly all our knowledge of the world, not of our own experience, but by the testimony of other people, or other sources of books, and so on. And the reflection about these facts are, in many cases, we are not doing by ourselves, but we refer to epistemic authorities of all kinds, who are, and we learn from them how to interpret the facts of the world. And in the end, we do not examine the systematically by ourselves or prove the systematically, but what we do, maybe we look around to the people who belong to our group and adapt our convictions to them. So, and in the end, we believe the same as the scientists, but is this a justified true belief, or what is it? Well, I'm not interested in this philosophical question. I'm interested to put this approach in explanatory approach. So I leave this to the philosophers, whether this is justified true or not. And of course, you can have maybe the same about the practical insight. So there you have it again in a very simplified version: testimony, authority, adaptation. And this is all. Then you take this insights from sources outside of your own experience, and that means is a trust relation. If you believe in the testimony of the man on the street, where is the main station, to take the next road left, well, then you accept something as a guideline for your behavior, which you cannot prove yourself in this moment. That means you accept a risk. You accept a risky situation. Why do you do it? Of course, because if the man is right, then you will be better off. You will find the main station. But if he betrays you, cheated you, you will be worse. Then you will go in the wrong direction, never get your train. And this is the main structure of a trust relation. And the trust relation is we have also in this epistemic context. And the same is if you trust, if you get information or interpretation from authority or adapt your views to other people. And then it's always that you have to trust this kind of sources because you are not in a situation to prove everything yourself. Okay, then is the question, if this is epistemic trust and you have this epistemic sources you are trusted in, how is this blind trust, or can this trust itself be justified? And there again, in a very simplified version, you can say, okay, we have three elements here which makes epistemic trust justifiable or rational. This is the first thing, is that what these people say to you must be inside what some people call your confidence, your confidence room. That means it must be coherent with beliefs you already have, and it must not diverge too much from your already given thoughts. If the man on the street tells you, well, the main station is 50 kilometers outside the town, you know that normally the main station is not outside the town, so that is maybe then not true. Then you must have some beliefs about the competence of the sources. That is he able to tell you where the main station is? Is the doctor able to diagnose the illness correctly? So this is the second aspect. And the third aspect is reliability. That means, do you think that this source, this authority, this man will not cheat you, that he is benevolent in some ways, and he will tell you the truth, that he is motivated even to tell the truth as good as he can himself. Okay, if you have these three conditions fulfilled, if you think these three conditions are fulfilled, then the epistemic trust from your subjective perspective is justified epistemic trust. But of course, the play goes on. So where do you get this information on this meta level, so to speak? Where did you get this information about the trustworthiness of your sources? And then again, it can iterate the situation. It can be again the case that you get this kind of information again from epistemic sources, that you do not yourself the search, but that you look to other sources. I will come back to this later, but you see already that this can be a highly complex and multi-layered process. But I will take first the simpler situation that, and this is the case, at some end you have to decide yourself whom to trust and not. You cannot only go to epistemic sources. Then we may be again at this individual epistemological situation, experience, reflection, examination. Well, are we now back, so to speak, at the original model which we want to avoid? Well, not really, because, and now this is the point Russell Hardin made in his book, what we need here is a kind of street level epistemology. We have, and this is, we try to integrate this kind now of search for insights by yourself in a rational actor theory, or what Russell calls an economy of ordinary knowledge. So what does it mean? Well, the main point is that we have to admit that looking for knowledge, that knowledge acquisition has costs and benefits. So that for the ordinary man, it cannot always be the priority to get the right answer, but he has, so to speak, to think how valuable is a right answer for him and what the costs of getting the right answer. So take again the man on the street. While the benefit is to have the right way to the main station, but the costs in inquiring in detail whether this is a psychopath or whether this is a not trustworthy person who is cheating everybody on the street, it does not make sense in this situation. It's better to just trust him and just go and take the risk that it's maybe wrong. So you have always this trade-off in ordinary circumstance between the truths and the resources you have, the time you have, the consumption needs. So you have always to, or not always, but in most of the times, are confronted with this kind of trade-off, and that means in order in normal circumstances we accepted that the knowledge is just satisfactory. That's not perfect. We accept some pragmatic incoherence in our thoughts. We do not invest too much energy to make all incoherence, to check for it or to remove it. And we use happenstance knowledge wherever we can. That means we put on the television, see the news, and there comes information, and we are glad to have it, and we don't need to invest anything. So if there is happenstance knowledge, we are glad to go along with it. So the main message there is ordinary knowledge is not scientific knowledge, and it cannot compare in the way we acquire it to the scientific or academic knowledge, and we should not try to conflate these two things. And that means that we have to accept that there is something like rational ignorance. You know this from the political science since many years. Rational ignorance means that we have to admit that people in some situation will be ignorant, but this is an outcome of a rational decision, because it is a result of the trade-offs they have to make. And therefore, because we have to accept this, and we all know it if you think about it, so there's a whole fabric in society to create certification and guidelines, which, so to speak, make the acquisition of knowledge a low-cost situation. This, for example, of course, we have titles, we have certifications for experts, so that I can just look where is the doctor with his sign on the door while I go there, so I don't need to explore myself whether he has the right expertise as a doctor or not. And if you look around in our world, we see that everywhere we have these guidelines. It starts with the sign on the street where's the way to the main station, and we have this whole huge fabric of certifications for expertise in all area of lives. And this is, of course, if we trust these kinds of certifications, we will get this knowledge at very low cost. We just have to follow the signs and the certifications. Okay, and then the question is, again, well, if it's the case that we have this kind of trade-offs, and if we have not only science, but we have to do something ourselves, so how do we do it? What are the tools of rationality we have in ordinary life circumstances to acquire this knowledge? What are the possibilities we have if we are not maximizers and optimizers like the traditional rational choice theory tells us? Well, there's a whole toolbox, as some people like to call it, which is fast and frugal, which helps us to do these trade-offs and to acquire knowledge under the circumstances where we have pressures of scarcity and the economizing on resources. And some people, this is traditional bounded rationality, but some people today prefer to call it an adaptive rationality, because it's not defect rationality, it is rationality which adapts to the situation we are living in, and it uses from its toolbox, so to speak, the tools which are in this situation adequate and which can help us to deal with these trade-offs in a way which is in our interest. Some call it ecological rationality, like Gerd Gigerenzer from Germany. So they all try to say, well, this is not irrational. This is not kind of a defective way to deal with situation. In the opposite, this is a possibility where we, as in ordinary circumstances, can deal with these knowledge questions in a rational way, but which also takes into account that we have to confront this trade-off situation. Well, and there's this toolbox. We are using heuristics. That means, for example, we use the certifications the society offers us to find experts. So we just use them as heuristics and don't think about them. We use frames which simplify situation, which exclude some aspects of the situation as not important if you decide something. We of course have habits in some situations. We always go to the same bakery. We always go to the same doctor because in the past it suits us well. We use our intuitions in many decision situations. We are like Herbert Simon said, we are satisficers. That is, we stop at a point where it's good enough for us, and we don't look to the optimal solution. Well, one example you can use here is the market of marriage. We choose a partner if we are satisfied, and we are not looking for the optimal one. That would never end, of course. Okay, and then we are ready to adapt our aspiration levels. We are not to try things if the investments would be too costly. Okay, these are the tools of adaptive rationality, which can be which from the outside can say, well, that's quite rational to use them, but it's not always rational. So we have these biases and blunders. If we use it, it could be the path dependency approach. Our heuristics, our frames, our habits are path dependency, and maybe the past, when we developed certain kind of heuristics or certain kind of frames, now the situation changed dramatically. So we should not use our old heuristics. We should not use our old frames. Maybe we should complement them. So this could be one, of course, serious and maybe one of the most important biases. But then we have the status quo addiction. We tend to immunize our experience as well, like scientists also do. We maybe are overconfident. There's the endowment effect and the loss aversion, which Tversky and Kahneman is a major topic. Then the anchoring availability biases, and so on and so on. So that, of course, this tool of adaptive rationality is not perfect, and it can lead us astray. But the important thing now is, if we want to correct it, we would correct the tools and not go back to a optimization or to an ideal rationality. We tell people, look at your heuristic. This is not okay. You should change the heuristic, or you should change your frames. But we would not do the advice, well, go back like a scientist and start from the beginning, so to speak. So we are moving inside this kind of adaptive rationality if we try to react to biases and blunders and try to improve the rationality of people. Especially Gerd Gigerenzer in Germany is one of the advocates of this strategy. He says it's not right to say this is all a kind of bad behaving, but we have instead see it's context dependent. In very many contexts, it serves us very, very well, and we have no other possibility. But in some contexts not, and then we should choose the tools, but not the overall rationality. Okay, this is very shortly the connection between epistemic trust and street level rationality, as you see it. So, and now I will come. Well, this is sorry, just too well. Don't take this so seriously. This is just a very speculative try, which I did in the last days, where I thought about it. Some parts are okay, but some parts are just speculative. So what is okay? That we can start from different kind of trust networks. So on the basis of what I said before, people will have different kind of trust networks in their groups, and they can be defective, as I would call them. And we can, the differences is, I made here very, very briefly, is between different kind of networks connected to different kind of group structures. Well, they have the ideal, the open group, where you have a general trust, everybody trusts everybody, and there maybe you have deliberation and plurality of views, and there you will produce something that justify beliefs. But then you can have segregated groups, which are in some way different from one another, isolated from one another, and inside this group then you have particularistic trust. The people in these groups only trust their group and not the mainstream or the outside group. And there maybe you can have this polarization and radicalization processes going on, and kind of emotional aspects, they may lead to fanatism as a, but I don't know the right things are, as I said, speculative. But then the segregated group can also be hierarchical. That means you have trust you have asymmetrical trust network. That means some people in the network are more important, have more influence than others. And then again, these leaders can also try to silence and exclude other people, so to make the group more inclusive, more so that the people who are very convinced stay and the others leave the group. And there maybe this is a kind of paradigmatically for extremism, because in extremism, I think very often, like in fundamentalism, you have a strong leader which is responsible for the content of extremist belief. And last but not least, you can have a segregated, hierarchical, and as I call it, devoted group. And what I mean by this, I mean in the devoted group, you have a charismatic leader, and he has or she has exclusive trust. That means he alone can determine what the other group members think. And well, we talked about the Chicago volumes. The Chicago studies show that in fundamentalism, they have religious fundamentalistic groups as a subject, and they can show convincingly, and this was an eye-opener for me, I must say, that every kind of religious fundamentalism in the world, in the tradition, was characterized by a charismatic leadership. And this was a very important part in this fundamentalistic group. Okay, so, but as I said, this is just, well, I don't know how far it goes with this, with the right side, but the left side, I think, makes quite, and the middle side makes quite sense. So what I would now want to show you at the end is how we worked on the special trust networks of devoted groups. And what we interested in our project was how they develop. It was not like they are in a special situation, which you can depict how a trust network looks like, but we were interested in the question, in the dynamics inside these trust networks, how they can develop. And for us, two questions were dominant, or were interesting. This was the one: how is it possible that a person became a dominating opinion leader or a charismatic leader by accumulating exclusive epistemic trust within a group? Because of course, a group starts not with having a charismatic leader. He must somehow be created. Well, as Max Weber already said, charismatic leadership is something which is ascribed. It is not something somebody just has. So the question arises: what kind of dynamics in a group are responsible that this ascription of charismatic leadership takes place? And the second question is how they could place exclusive epistemic trust in a person, and thereby, and this is, I think, very important, adopt extremist beliefs that were initially outside the opinion space. I think this is a project. I don't know if you look at the conspiracy theory in connection to the Corona crisis. What you see very often, unfortunately, also in my wider family, that in the last year, people start with some beliefs. Okay, they say the pharma industry may be behind it, and it's not all right, and something like this. Well, this is a belief which is not totally, from my point of view, irrational. Okay, but a year later, they have beliefs which are astonishingly more extreme, so that they think, for example, that all the people who dies in hospital are in fact dying from vaccination and not from the COVID virus. And this is, of course, a very extreme belief. And so they started with something. I'm sure that if you have told them a year ago, they would say, no, that's not true. But now they believe things they originally didn't believe. And so this is, I think, a very important and characteristic process in such groups, that people started with beliefs and end with much more extremist belief than they were themselves ready to accept at the beginning. And this is a question which, of course, I think, if you look at the actual situation, is really an important empirical development. Okay, our central assumptions have been that, well, that people adapt mutually their beliefs, as it was on the basis of social epistemology, adapt mutually their beliefs on the basis of epistemic trust. But then important that belief formation involves first order opinions. That means what people think about certain facts in their field. Maybe this vaccine is good or is not so good. And second order opinions about the epistemic trustworthiness of persons. So this is a combination. And of course, their first order opinions are somehow dependent on what they about their second order opinions, whom they trust, and then their first order opinions can follow on this. And epistemic trustworthiness, well, I said before, is based on coherence, competence, and ascription of reliability. So, but if you now think that the people are adapting mutually their beliefs on the first order beliefs and on the second order beliefs, and then there is a dynamic between these two processes, this is very hard to analyze without simulation models. And this is what we did. The price you have to pay is that these simulation models are, of course, very much simplified, that they have only that they only pick up some aspects, and while you can try to calibrate them more or less to the empirical facts, so about the mutual influence. But of course, there are very many artificial assumptions. Therefore, the hypothesis they produce, of course, you have to prove in the next step in an empirical study. So, but they can be, I think they can be interesting. They can be produce interesting hypotheses, and as we noticed, some really surprising results, which we did not saw not in the beginning, but afterwards, okay, we know some empirical evidence that this might be true, but we didn't think about it before. So very, very briefly, only for the model itself, but you can read it in one of our publications. So the model describes the beliefs, how the beliefs of agent change. They have first and second order beliefs. This is all numbers, of course, and then everybody assigns himself and other agent degrees of epistemic competence, and this is maybe the important thing. An agent trusts another agent as long as his first order beliefs are inside his own confidence interval, because if it's not too far away from what he believes already. And he started with assigning him at least the same level of competence as to himself. And then you have the two dynamic principles, that the first order beliefs are always adapted from time to time to the beliefs of the other people in the trust network, and that the same happens with the second dynamic principle, with the second order beliefs. But interesting is that if the second order beliefs, the assumption about the trustworthiness of other people change, and of course also the first order beliefs will change. And this is the dynamic we were interested in. So I have now a very simplified visualization of our results. In the articles you got a better, a more detailed and explained version. But these are the main things. So you can say you can have a stable equilibrium, maybe in an open group with general trust. Everybody trusts everybody. They have the same beliefs in some interval, but this is stable. There is no dynamic in this situation. The same can be if you have two segregated groups. They have a kind of particularistic trust, but there is still some trust relations to the other group. So that means that their convictions are not totally not influenced by the other group, but of course the trust relations are quite weak. So the confidence in the group can be, the beliefs in this group can be quite apart. And you can have some asymmetrical trust. You can have an opinion leader in this one group who has a special influence on this. On the other group members, and technically it means that they trust him, but he trusts nobody. So the opinion leader is characterized by a man who is very self-confident. He trusts only himself, and he is not influenced by the convictions of other people. Yeah, and then you can have this devoted group where you have this charismatic leader who is determining what you mean, and there's no trust relations between the groups at all. Also a stable situation. But we are, of course, interested in the dynamics. And so we start with a trust network which is not stable. But it's characterized by certain relations. And what you see here is this potential opinion leader, but only one of the group P10 trusts in him. And there are some trust relations to the mainstream group, you can call it. And even in this, well, I cannot tell you the speciality of it, but what you can see there, that in such a situation, relatively quickly it can come that now under the influence of P10, because P9 trusts P10, P9 starts to trust also P8, which it did not before. And that the trust relations between P5 and P10 are now weakening or vanishing. And this process can go in some steps further, that P7 starts to trust P8, and that other trust relations to the mainstream group are cut down, are weakened, so that you have at the end a stable situation in this, as I call it, devoted group. Another dynamic which we analyzed is that a charismatic leader comes from outside this group. There's only one trust relation, again, from one of the members to this leader, but potential leader. But again, this can start a process in which others of the group start to trust him, and then they will have also a devoted group. And of course, the main thing is not only that the trust network changes, but the beliefs, of course, change. At the end, the members of this devoted group will have quite different beliefs from first order beliefs from what they have at the beginning, and the charismatic leader is able to dictate them totally his view of the world, so to speak. So now, what is now for us one of the most interesting findings? Here you have nearly the same situation as before, where the result was development of a devoted group. You have only one difference here, that P10 has trust relations to P6. So this seems to be not a very important change, but it's enough that the devoted group will not develop, but that the other people will be integrated into the mainstream, and only P7 will have still some trust relations to P8. So a little change in the trust networks can have big results in the dynamics, well, in the model, now in the first place. But this was something which came, I think, is very plausible, that we can think that little changes in trust relations can have a great influence in the following dynamics. I will come back to this later. And I think the last example is what happens when the leader, the charismatic leader of a devoted group, vanishes or is killed or whatever, or kills himself in a bomb attack. So then it can be the case that weak trust relations are revitalized, so to speak, from former times to the mainstream. And here again, only one weak trust relation from P10 to P5 is enough that a dynamic can evolve, where at the end the people from the former radical group are now reintegrated in the mainstream. Okay, these were our the result of the simulation model, and these are the hypotheses which follow from there. I already named some, and as I think they are quite interesting, and we know from anecdotal evidence that some of them are quite plausible. Well, the first thing is that trust in a potential leader must not initially be especially strong or exclusive. So it can start in a very harmless way, that in a group he has some people who trust him, which are trusted by others, and it can even be the case that the other people in the group are very far away from the beliefs this leader has, but at the end they will change and will be part of the group. Then that a strong leader can initially from outside the group. We must not be integrated already in a group. It can be enough that there are weak trust relations from only one or two members of the group to this outside leader, and it can happen that they manage it, that the others will integrate the leader in the group and will accept him as a leader. Another thing is that unshakable self-confidence is a crucial precondition to become a strong leader. I think this is self-explaining in some way. So if you are influenced by others, you will not be the leader of the pack, so to speak. And so the most important thing is that you trust nobody except yourself. That is, you are so convinced that you will not adapt your views to others. And this is a good precondition to become, to get in such a situation. And this is another important finding, which I think is quite plausible, but very important, that extremist beliefs or deviant beliefs or fundamentalist beliefs can gradually become plausible. That it's indeed the case that they can start from very harmless positions, and that's only in the process of adapting to the people you trust and in changing your trust relations step by step, you get conviction, which in the beginning were quite outside your opinion space. And I said anecdotally, unfortunately, I experienced this myself in my wider family. So it was kind of a proof of this. Yeah, and another very important thing is, if it's true, that weak trust relations with the mainstream can immunize a group against deviant beliefs. And this, I think, is, if true, very important. Why is it very important? Because we very often think, oh, there is a radical group, and we have to take very strong measures to get into this group and to destroy their beliefs and their convictions. And this is not an easy thing. We have to do there must be strong measures. But indeed, it can be that it is enough to just get to one or two of these members and to have weak trust, just have some kind of trust relations. And this could be enough to destroy the whole group. Of course, not automatically, that's clear. But so it is, I think, if this is true, and I think it's anecdotally, we know also that there's some plausibility, that can means a lot for the strategies we can use in front of these groups. We don't have to confront all group members. It is enough if we can take out one or two of them. Okay, and well, this other is not a very optimistic generalization of our findings, that just to take others seriously can be sufficient to become an extremist. That means you are just by chance in a group and you say, well, these are my friends, these are my trust, they belong to my trust network. Of course I take them seriously, I just have to listen to them. And this could be in some way be sufficient step by step to become an extremist. And at the end, again, talking about conspiracy theories, you very often hear, we did some research, qualitative study on the development on conspiracy theory in the context of COVID-19. So very much hear from people who are becoming then part of this extremist thinking. They say, oh, we just have to hear to somebody else, not only to the official expert. We have just take them seriously. Just look at the YouTube of Wodrak or some other expert. They are also experts. Just take them seriously, hear what they have to say. This sounds quite harmless, but in fact, it could be, and you could see it actually really, unfortunately, really often, this could be the step in, so to speak, in this other world. Okay, thank you so much. And that was it as input from my side.